Cultivation is hiding something. She has a plan for the Cosmere, and she has been subtly influencing things for longer than you think. Welcome to our Canon Uncovered, where we dig deep into the lore of the Cosmere and theorycraft on what could be coming next. There will be a lot of major Cosmere spoilers, so be sure to check out the spoiler warning in the description down below. You have been warned. When you look at the shards of the Cosmere, it's easy to see certain ones as antagonists. Ruin on Scadrial just wanted to destroy things. Odium on Roshar seems like he wants to conquer the Cosmere at large. And then there's Autonomy in Taldane. That's the White Sands for anyone unaware, who we've actively seen on both Scadrial and Cell. Outside of that though, most of the shards seem to be content just minding their own business. There is one though that has been subtly influencing the Cosmere for a very long time, and their plan has the potential to destroy the world. That shard is Cultivation. So first off, who is Cultivation? Corvelium Avast is, like all original shard holders, from Yolen. Unlike the other shard holders though, she is a dragon. That's right, she's a frickin' dragon. We know that she's always been calculating, making her a really good fit for her shard. And pre-shattering, she was in a relationship with Honor. But we don't really know anything aside from that about her before the shattering. Once Corvelium became Cultivation, we have only seen sprinklings of her touch. There are 3 people we have in recorded history of her touching on Roshar. The King Taravangian, the Warmonger Dalinar, and the child Lift. Let's take a look at each of those people though, and see if we can determine Cultivation's plan. First off, Dalinar. We know a lot about Dalinar. We have received flashbacks from him, and he is the only human we have seen have interactions with Cultivation on page. When Dalinar approached the Nightwatcher, he asked for one thing: forgiveness. Cultivation, though, knew that the Nightwatcher would not be able to handle this request and stepped in. The boon and curse he received that day were one and the same. He forgot the name of his wife. The impact this seemingly small thing would have on the Cosmere as a whole is massive though. This is where we are sort of getting into the first part of conjecture in this video. Dalinar's vision with Nohadon currently has no real explanation. The most common theory I see by Arcanists is that it's some form of spiritual adhesion due to both Dalinar and Nohadon bonding the Stormfather. I don't believe that's the case though. I think this vision was actually directly created by Cultivation. It ends with a simple question. What is the most important step man can take? It is this exact question that allowed Dalinar to overcome Odium's influence in the Battle of Thaylen Field. It is this exact thing that led to the eventual death of Reyes. This leads us directly into our next Cultivation touched person. Taravangian was a king with one simple desire. He wanted the capacity to save his people. This presented in an interesting boon and curse. His intelligence fluctuated day to day. The more intelligence he had, the less emotion he had. The more emotion he had, the less intelligence he had. This allowed for the potential of essentially limitless intelligence, but could also result in boundless stupidity where he could spend the entire day in the puddle of his own drool. Why did she do this though? Taravangian pre-Ascension thought that it was the intelligence that was needed to save his people. Once he ascended to Odium, he thought it was the emotion. What was the real purpose though? This is where it gets tricky, because first we have to ask a question. Why would Cultivation plan for the downfall of Reyes? She is the shard of Cultivation, so everything she does has to be done with this in mind. She can't go against the intent of the shard, especially with Odium taking every opportunity he can to splinter shards. So what was she doing? Rather than plotting to kill Reyes, she was instead focused on cultivating a replacement vessel for Odium. But why? Why did she want to cultivate a vessel for her shard? I believe that this is one of 3 recorded attempts that she's made at creating a vessel that can control the shard's intent instead of being controlled by the intent of the shard. What do I mean by that? In a letter between Hoid and Frost, it is stated, 80 was once a kind and generous man, and you saw what became of him. Jumping over to Scadrial for a moment, 80 is the original Vessel of Ruin. This supposedly kind and generous man was corrupted by the intent of the shard, the intent of ruin. He became focused on nothing but destruction. And so Cultivation, after seeing what had happened to AD and seeing the path that Reyes was on, had a plan. A plan to cultivate a vessel that could control the intent of a shard. Taravangian had to deal with both boundless emotion and boundless intelligence. He now has the boundless intelligence of a shard and is the vessel of a shard of boundless emotion. Cultivation's plan wasn't simply to destroy Reyes. She made no attempt at shattering the shard. Instead, she cultivated a vessel that she hoped could control the intent of that shard. Does this sound crazy? Buckle up, because this is only 2 of the 3 people that she touched. And I said she prepared 3 vessels to take up the shard. The next vessel she's attempting to cultivate to make a shard is the Child Lift. Some people think this sounds a bit out there, but hear me out. We know a few things about Lift, although the exact boon and curses aren't known. We know that she can metabolize food directly into lifelight. This is similar to a Mistborn investing metals, which is key to specific powers. Only like Stormlight, this power isn't key to a specific ability. The interesting thing here is that she visited the Nightwatcher before her bond with Wendell. We know this because Cultivation's touch is one of the reasons the Cultivation Spren decided to send Wendell to bond with her. We also know that she's able to touch Spren, and Wendell hypothesizes that this is because she exists partially in the cognitive realm. And she's been partially in the cognitive realm for a really long time. By the end of Book 10, she will have spent most of her life partially in the cognitive realm. We also know that she's one of the major players in the back half of the Stormlight Archives. I believe the connection to Shadesmar and her being able to metabolize food directly into Stormlight, which is something that's done in the spiritual realm, is preparation Cultivation is making to see if this is a path that will work for being able to control a shard. I said, when everything else is going wrong, I want to be the same. I want to stay me, not become someone else. What if she doesn't recognize me? This is the boon that Lift asked for. There are a few different ways this could be taken. It seems like Lift meant it as wanting to stay young forever. I think there's more to it than that. And I think Cultivation thought the exact same thing. I think she saw this as an opportunity to create a new vessel for a shard. So what vessel? Cultivation herself. But why would Cultivation replace herself? Why would Cultivation plan the death of herself? What if this is going to be the first time we see a vessel survive losing their shard because they give it up willingly? Remember when we first started talking about Corvellium? Her distinct attribute? You know that she's a freaking dragon? Dragons in the Cosmere are functionally immortal. What does that mean? Well, according to Brandon, the way I've written dragons in the Cosmere, all dragons are naturally functionally immortal. They can be killed, but they don't age. So perhaps, through the desire to cultivate a vessel that is even more fitting, Corvellium will give up the shard of cultivation to Lift, in turn giving us the first formal vessel of a shard to walk among us. The Lord Ruler held the powers of preservation for a brief time at the Well of Ascension, but we would now have a formal vessel that is unbound by the inhibitions of their shard, one that held their power for thousands of years, and is once again functionally immortal, walking among the Cosmere. Does this sound crazy? Well, check out this WoB. Somebody once asked Brandon if AD had somehow managed to give up Ruin and return to being a regular person, would his mind have gradually reverted from its corruption by Ruin's intent, or would he always be determined to destroy? Brandon's response was, over time, Ruin's influence would fade, but AD would remain a sliver. So there would be some permanent effects. This still doesn't answer the question, though. The question of why. Why Lift? Look at that second part of her request from Cultivation again. What if she doesn't recognize me? Look at her driving factor for wanting to stay the same. What if she doesn't recognize me? We don't know much about Lift's backstory, but we do know that she's concerned about her mom recognizing her. At least, we assume it's her mom. That's why she asked for the boon she did of the Nightwatcher. Why was she concerned about this, though? I think most of us have attributed this to her being a quirky young girl that doesn't really understand how the world works and has a lot of maturing to do. What if it's something more, though? What if Lift can physically change? What if Lift is a dragon? The greater dragons, as we'll call them, Brandon said. They're basically like amphibians. They have to spend part of their life cycle in the humanoid form. They give birth in humanoid form. Then they have a transformation in puberty to dragon form. And then can go back and forth after that. What if Lift, maybe even just subconsciously, knew that she was going to become a dragon? What if she was afraid of being able to change back? What if this is why she didn't want to change? Not because she didn't want to grow older, not because she didn't want to increase in size, but because she was afraid of shapeshifting into something that would be completely unrecognizable by anyone. At this point, we would have a functionally immortal dragon that spent the majority of their life in all three realms, secretly being cultivated as a new vessel for a shard. One that may be able to control the intent of the shard. This may all sound crazy, and to be completely honest with you, I'm not convinced that Lift is a dragon myself. Although if she is, who knows? Maybe Cultivation's the mother. Okay, I'm joking. Maybe. Regardless, I believe Lift is being propped up to take the Shard of Cultivation. Corvellium is planning on relinquishing her power as a shard and returning to the realm of mortals. But that leaves us, I said 3 vessels. So, the final one, Dalinar, right? I mean, yeah, potentially. Dalinar, a lot of people think is going to take up the Shard of Honor, but that's actually not who I'm referring to. Don't get me wrong, he could potentially be part of Cultivation's plan, taking up the Shard of Honor, unite them and all that, but that's not the person that I'm referring to. Sometimes I worry that I'm not the hero everyone thinks I am. The philosophers assure me that this is the time, that the signs have been met. But I still wonder if they have the wrong man. So many people depend on me. They say I will hold the future of the entire world on my arms. The hero will have the power to save the world, but he will also have the power to destroy it. What if the prophecy of the Hero of Ages was Cultivation's first attempt at creating a vessel that's capable of controlling the intent of a shard? What if the world didn't just refer to Scadrial, but instead was talking about the entire Cosmere? Something that a casual reader may not know is that these books are meant to be read as if someone is using connection to speak with us. Azish isn't English. Alethi isn't English. Scadrian, or whatever they speak over there, isn't English. Brandon writes these books as if someone in-world is using something similar to a connection medallion to give it to us in our own language. This is one of the first ever published works of Brandon, done in 2006 before the term Cosmere was ever known. The first WoB that even mentions the word Cosmere is from July 8th, 2009, at a book signing. Ad nauseam has to do with the Cosmere, which is the word romantic philosophers use to refer to the greater universe of the Shard Worlds. If this book was recorded in modern day, both Cosmere time and real world time, with knowledge of the Cosmere being widespread, it may instead say, "They say I hold the future of the entire Cosmere on my arms." The hero will have the power to save the Cosmere, but he will also have the power to destroy it. And before you start saying that the prophecy of the Hero of Ages is complete, let me bring you to this part of it, one that the large majority of Arcana still believe has yet to pass. He shall defend their ways, yet shall violate them. He will be their savior, yet they shall call him heretic. His name shall be Discord, and they shall love him for it. The Hero of Ages is not a prophecy that has been completely fulfilled. That much is pretty much agreed on. But we do have a couple of things we have to address. We have one line in Secret History that casts doubt on this theory, and an annotation that we have to tackle, along with a post on the Timewasters Guide forum from long ago. Let's look at the line first, though. "I can't stop him," Kelsier whispered. "I know," Preservation said. "I could see thousands upon thousands of possibilities, and none of them did I defeat that thing." "The ribbons of the future are never as useful as they should be," Preservation said. "I rode them much in the past. It's hard to see what is actually likely and what is just a fragile, distant maybe." Preservation never actually says that he created the prophecy. Instead, he just states that they are fragile, distant maybes. The reality is that we don't have any confirmation in world on who created the prophecy. Everything we hear is just theory crafting from people. This is where it gets a little sticky, though. From the Annotations of Hero of Ages, Chapter 81, Part 1, Brandon gives this little snippet. Sazed and Tyndall have a great discussion about the prophecies in Book 2. Regardless, I make use of the prophecies here in the final book. As far as I'm concerned, they were given to the original Terris people by Preservation as a means of maintaining hope. They were a promise. A hero will come, and that hero will protect you. Have faith. The phrasing here is interesting. As far as I'm concerned. Now, I don't want to get too caught up in the wording, because regardless of how definitive Brandon was when he first declared this, that doesn't mean it can't be retconned. But I do want to point out that this is akin to saying, "I would like to believe." And this is also not nearly as affirmative of an answer he gave back in 2008 in the Time Waster Guide forum. There he said, the Terris prophecies were created by Preservation before he attempted his imprisonment. He knew that he wouldn't be able to do much for the world after he did what he did, and he foresaw a lot of what was to come. To me, the change in wording between those two things, and not even a full 2-year gap, shows that Brandon started having other plans, especially once he got deeper into the Stormlight Archives. Also, let's take another look at what Laris, Preservation, stated about this. "The ribbons of the future are never as useful as they should be," Preservation said. "I rode them much in the past. It's too hard to see what is actually likely and what is just a fragile, distant maybe. It's too hard." This implies that Laris gave up on finding a solution. That is, until another shard that is much better at looking into the future stepped in. And at that point, even the annotation is correct. Because Cultivation wouldn't have been the one to give the prophecy to the Terris, but instead to their god Preservation, who instead gave it to them. You see, other shards may have declined to get help, but Laris, being the vessel of Preservation, had one prime goal: to preserve his people. But aside from me just liking the idea of Cultivation meddling on another planet to create a new vessel, is there anything in-world that could potentially point to Cultivation having influence in Scadrial? Well, there's a WoB for that. Worldbringers and Worldsingers have very similar names. Is there a reason for this? Brandon simply said, yes. The common theory for this is that Hoid is a connection. He is a master Worldsinger, and Brandon even confirms in Tress that he claims to be a Worldbringer. But what if there's more to it than that? What if the root is a common shard, and Hoid just happens to have a kinship with the nature of each of these groups? Well, unfortunately we know that Cultivation did not create the Worldsingers. There's a WoB that specifically states that the Worldsingers were created by Hoid. Hoid never joined the Worldsingers. How can you join an organization that you create? But that doesn't mean there isn't a connection. You see, as said by everyone's favorite world hopper, there are those who, when the boulder of time rolls towards them, stand up in front of it and hold out their hands. All their lives they've been told how great they are. They assume that the world will bend to their whims as their nurse did when fetching them a fresh cup of milk. Those men end up squished. Other men stand to the side when the boulder of time passes, but are quick to say, "See what I did? I made the boulder roll there. Don't make me do it again." These men end up getting everyone else squished. Then there's a third type, but they are oh so rare. These know they can't stop the boulder, so they walk beside it, study it, and bide their time. Then they shove it, ever so slightly, to create a deviation in its path. These are the men, these are the men that actually change the world. And they terrify me, for men never see as far as they think they do. Another quote from Hoid himself: "Never trust anyone who claims to know the future." The thing is, at least on Roshar, Hoid and Cultivation's goals do align a bit. They both know that Ray's is a very dangerous man. How they plan to keep him in check, though, are two very different things. Hoid wants to keep Ray's contained to Roshar. Cultivation, however, has a very different plan. Cultivation wants odium to no longer be a force for hatred, but instead be a force that is equal for all emotion, and have a vessel that can harness that properly. Although not as evident on Roshar, just as the Worldbringers are responsible for the death of 80, the Vessel of Ruin, Worldsingers are responsible for the death of Ray's, the Vessel of Odium. For without their stories, our heroes would have never been able to undermine Odium, which led to the eventual death of its vessel. There is a connection, one that Hoid thought he was the king in, but was instead just the pawn of a shard. So why though? Why interfere? I still haven't answered that question. I laid the groundwork for how it's possible that Cultivation was responsible for the Hero of Ages, but what makes Sazed so special that Cultivation wanted him? Well, this being Cultivation's first attempt was not only her sloppiest attempt, but also potentially her most dangerous. Scadrial lined up perfectly for an experiment. 80 was the best of all men, kind and gentle, but could not control the intent of ruin. So Cultivation's first attempt wasn't to create a vessel that could control the intent of a shard, but instead to create a vessel that could harness two diametrically opposed shards, in the hopes that the two intents would balance each other out, creating harmony. Unfortunately for Scadrial, and potentially the rest of the Cosmere, this first attempt may be what causes the true big bad of the Cosmere. Not harmony, but instead discord. They can't stop the boulder, so they walk beside it, study it, and bide their time. Then they shove it, ever so slightly, to create a deviation in its path. These are the men who actually change the world. And they terrify me, for men never see as far as they think they do. Cultivation is attempting to save the Cosmere, but in her attempt to create harmony, she may have ended up causing its destruction. We went down a lot of rabbit holes during this theory, and some, maybe even most of them, may end up being dead ends. But it opens the door to a lot of theories that may need their own video even. What do you think though? Did Cultivation create the prophecy of the Hero of Ages? Is she priming Lift to be a replacement? Is Lift a dragon? Maybe her plan for Dalinar isn't just to be a foil for Ray's, but instead, he is going to take up the Shard of Honor. The possibilities are endless. So be sure to like and subscribe, and be sure to join us next time so that we can all become a little more quantifiably invested. First off, Dalinar. Dalinar. Done in 2006, before the term Cosmere was even known. Nern. As the nurse did when fetching them a fresh cup of nurse. Fresh cup of... What?